Tech Podcast. Today we're joined by Adrian Harvey, an ignition systems engineer, joining Mike live at ICC 2025. Welcome in, guys.
Hey, Jeff. Oh, man, it's great to be here. I'm your co-host, Mike Flotis, with the Energy Tech Podcast, right here in the heart of Sacramento at ICC 2025 with Adrian Harvey. She has been in the community for quite some time, both on systems engineering and integration, and we're going to have the chance to get her take on ICC 2025 and what she's been up to. Adrian, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's such a fun opportunity. I haven't been on a podcast in a while, and what a great experience. You guys are absolute pros. I can see the workflow. This is an amazing team.
Well, you know what? We're excited to be here. We love it. And, you know, ICC 2025 this year, I think, has a really different energy and feel to it, Adrian, okay? And here's what I mean. When you take that theme of level up, I think it's a few things. Number one, it's Ignition's new venue here in Sacramento. So as we know, we were at Folsom. You have that. It's crowded. So I think this expands not just the number of people and the number of, end users, integrators, products, but it just has a really good leveled up feel and the energy's high. The second thing is their release of 8.3.
Yes.
Right? That's a big deal,
Huge.
And I'll talk to you about that in a minute. And I think the third thing for them is they've got this Prove It conference flavor that has gone on that originated out of Walker Reynolds and 4.0 solutions, coming on and adding this Prove It flavor to what they're doing. The fourth thing is us. You know what? Energy Tech Podcast gets to come here and hear from you and hear from end users and hear from integrators and hear from products that are out here and get their take on ICC 2025 and the Ignition community.
Absolutely.
And here's what I want to do. I want to ask you personally, we're almost, today's the last day for the conference, but what have you taken away so far and what do you hope to get at the end of this?
Well, this has been an amazing conference. I've been to ICC once before,
Right.
2023, but full disclosure, I feel like I didn't get the full conference experience because my team and I we were in Build-a-Thon.
Yeah.
And so we were on stage, and by the time we completed that project and got to the conference, we were all like, whoa, okay, we're going to take in as much as we can. But we were so focused on Build-a-Thon.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know something great is happening here, but my mind is absolutely fried. So,
No, you're right. You're right.
Now I'm getting to experience this. And, I did give a talk yesterday, but compared to Build-a-Thon, giving a talk, no big deal.
Right.
But yeah, it's been great. I've made so many new friends, and I love how this larger venue, it's actually allowed more of us to meet each other because we can physically make it across the room in a reasonable amount of time. Before it was like, there's this packed energy, but wow, it's, it was
So you had a
grown.
talk. Was this a tabletop or where were you?
I was in the Edge Theater,
Okay.
and I gave a presentation on a program I made within Ignition Maker Edition
Okay.
for my electronics inventory at home.
All right. What is that about? Talk to us a bit about that because I'm interested.
Oh, so this is super fun.
Yeah.
And I will be at the collab later doing a live demo with it.
Awesome.
But basically I have a lot of bits and bobs and pieces and parts because I'm involved with Maker Electronics. And,
Got you.
Anyone who's involved in that or radio has a lot of items at home
Yeah.
they need to keep track of.
Right.
And I had been inspired by so many warehouse automation projects and warehouse management systems projects that I'd been on
Right.
with a previous integrator that I was like, well, I can do that at home. I can do that with Maker. And so I've been kind of iteratively developing that program. First off, it's just filling a database and it's putting things in there. But then it's like, oh, I can check this. I can make sure I don't buy this thing twice, which it has helped me with that. I am both proud and embarrassed to say. But also now, okay, the next thing, I'm going to put together a pick-to-light system. Eventually, I'd love to put a little robot on rails that can go get things for me and put them back, as I'm short and I need a step stool right now.
Right.
And that's kind of annoying. Like, oh yeah, robot. Perfect. So I'm going to have a little tiny ASRS in my living room at some point. So that is the project from there. And also it's got a very loud interface, very, very easy to use because I'm doing most of the data entry. So those tab orders are right.
Yes.
But it's also very fun.
Yeah.
So it's you don't get to
That's
make
awesome.
wild looking stuff for work.
Yeah, and
thankfully.
that's great on the maker side. But I want to
Right.
talk to you a little bit about what you've been up to in terms of Ignition, because I think you've got lots of great alignment in your experience. I mean, you personally, right? In terms of what you've been doing, I'm kind of watching, looking, and Adrian, you have spent time. Energy Tech focuses on bridging the gap between technology and energy.
Right.
And we talk to folks both in oil and gas, data center, landfill gas, renewable natural gas, methane recovery.
Yes.
And you've in the past have been involved in similar projects. So I want you to kind of talk about that for a
Okay.
second to set the stage in terms of what you've been doing, let's say in the energy space
Yes.
per se. And then from there, I want to get your take a little bit on some of the success and maybe even a little bit on failures that you've seen, right? Some of the challenges that are faced in the energy industry. Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of set us up here.
Okay.
What you've done and what you've done there.
So my previous employer, Corso Systems, has this amazing customer that I've actually spent a lot of time with.
Right.
And I even went on site with them. I needed to have my, the 4-gas meter and,
Right.
and hard hat and everything. And I spent about, 10 hours out there documenting a fully proprietary system within either, I've heard it methane upgrading, I've heard it methane recovery, but there are all these little companies that have made these proprietary systems.
Right.
And they had this one, they wanted to bring it into Ignition, but they didn't have access to the server. And by that I mean no one had passwords for the server.
Right.
If the power supply died in that thing, they were going to be dead in the water at
Yeah.
that plant. Just
Wow.
full stop. Okay. So
Yeah.
I had to go in there, and they did have the PLCs already, brought over from the proprietary one. Someone had very lovingly hand made the new program. But we had to pull those tags into Ignition, and we had to recreate so many of these screens from this old, very proprietary, very closed system. There was, no designer equivalent. So I went out there and took about 1 billion screenshots, annotated them, tried to organize them, and me and one other team member alone recreated those pages in Ignition.
Wow.
And it was very cool. And I learned a lot about methane. And upgrading in the meantime. So this was a digester, and it was coming in from dairy waste,
Right.
which is a very polite way to say manure.
Right. Right.
I love cheese, and now I can feel less bad about eating it
you
because
go.
we've got this other amazing resource from these animals.
Right.
So it's coming into the digester. From there, this particular plant of theirs uses bio-reactors
Right.
and also the membrane system.
Okay.
And so from there, it would process the methane, and then it would go into the pipeline if it was, up to spec.
Right.
Otherwise, it's out to the flare.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Absolutely.
So that was the case there. Now, this company has a unique challenge because they don't have just that one site. They have other sites, and those other sites may or may not use the same process.
Right. I see.
So I don't know if maybe these sites already existed,
Right.
and then they, were purchased or what, but they use totally different systems.
Okay.
But here's the cool part. In Ignition, they were all, the operators could go from one site to the other because, I'm just interacting with this in Ignition. It may or may not be using a filter system. It might be bioreactors. It might be the water method, but regardless of method, where they would go and look at Ignition, and they would have kind of some continuity across those sites, even though they were using these different methods.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is that you took advantage of the flexibility of Ignition in order to, it sounds to me like what you really did was take those tags, made sense of that in terms of UDTs, and then provided a way in which they could interact with not just with one site, but give them the ability to interact with other sites. Is that fair?
The eventual goal is going to be something more in that kind of standardization level.
Right.
But because of Ignition, they are at the point, they're poised for that to take hold.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of challenges they can overcome, even though
get
they
it.
have all these different plants that are working in different ways.
I see what you're saying. So in
Yeah.
other words, hey, we've given them, there's a groundwork now
Right.
that will allow for the integration of other facilities if we can, just because of Ignition's flexibility. Right?
Absolutely. And regardless of where you're getting the data from, you can use Ignition. I mean,
Right.
isn't that what we all love about Ignition?
Absolutely.
You know, you can integrate anything with it.
Yeah,
you know?
and one of the things I want to ask you, because you obviously started this project, it sounds to me, you took a lot of screenshots, and it's tough. It's tough because those proprietary systems, and you don't have to name them, but I will. They exist. Factory Talk, Signet, Wonderwares, ClearSCADA. They're paywall systems that exist that are out there. Some are older, and so you're in a bind, right?
This is actually worse than that.
Oh wow.
This wasn't even those known systems.
Okay. Wow.
This was something, I guess, made in the Netherlands.
Okay.
By a company that, actually did the processing of the methane.
Wow.
And this was their own homegrown
solution at that
rolled
time.
their own, here's the screens to control this machine
Wow.
type of situation.
So
So those challenges are also definitely very real, but this was worse.
Yeah.
I mean, more challenging. Yeah, I don't like to be negative.
Right.
More
No.
challenging.
No, I think you're right. And you're right. That's a challenge. And
Yes.
and that's okay. You took it on. So let me ask you now, in this particular case, in your mind, Adrian, how do you think, what are some of the best things that you've done, and your team, anyone that you work with, how have you handled going and working that? Because that's a legacy thing, right? Those
Absolutely.
are legacy products. What is your take on the challenge of legacy equipment into Ignition? Like, what's your take on that?
Well, that's a cool thing. With Ignition, you have a lot of different options for a lot of different budgets.
Right.
In this case, fortunately, they had a controls engineer, who was very gifted controls engineer,
Yeah.
who was able to recreate the PLC programs and keep everything running, regardless of what the front end looked like.
Right.
But then at that point, it was like, oh, he's actually a factory talk view guy, so he was using a lot of PlantPAx
Right.
or PlantPAx, as he
Right.
liked to call it. But we were able to just pull right into that. We pulled UDTs out of those
Okay.
right into Ignition, because Ignition was like, yeah, I know what that is.
Yes.
And so that saved us a step from there. But then, other times you're going to find something that's so proprietary and so strange, you might just be like, you know what? Let's just get some MQTT going on here. Let's get some sensors that are going to throw some Sparkplug B out.
Yes.
And then once that hits Ignition's like, oh, Sparkplug B, here's all your tags. You're welcome. I love that about Ignition.
So the first part of the challenge, now I heard you already where you talked about, okay, way to document screens. This was actually creating the process. So you actually cared about going to site and actually mapping out that process and getting photos, right? Because that's what made sense for the field, for field groups and operations.
Right.
And then what I'm hearing on that second step is you were able to look at Factory Talk, and it sounds like you stood up Ignition right next to it, maybe connected OPC UA, who knows, right? You made that connection, you stood this up, and then you said, okay, now that we do that, a great transition because of Ignition's capability and flexibility, we can pick up those UDT tags and shorten our work by leveraging some of what may already exist in the structure of the UDT, right?
Exactly.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. So the UDTs were coming from. It was funny because we weren't using Factory Talk View at all. It's
Right.
just he was, their engineer was coming from that side of things. So
Right.
of course he was going to use PlantPAx, but PlantPAx has those UDTs that are related. And
Sure.
then you bring that straight in,
Right.
and and Ignition knew what all that was.
Yeah.
And we were able to get those UDTs right away.
And I have such a great connection with that. So I worked at I did a rail facility in 2023,
All right.
and I spoke about it actually at ICC with the Ignition Oil and Gas Collective.
Excellent.
And this was a company that spent over $1 million on PlantPAx,
Wow.
and they had it at a rail car facility that was not integrated at all. They couldn't bring in the rail car data. They couldn't bring in tank data. They had some tanks. They were all disconnected, but stood up Ignition. And within weeks, 6 weeks, we had a full-blown Ignition platform. We were collecting data, sending in balances, and had at least 3 to 4 mobile applications built in perspective
That is so great.
in
Don't
6
you-
weeks.
That 6 weeks. That's incredible. You went from zero to hero in 6 weeks.
We had to,
Love it.
and had no choice.
Yeah.
There was a longer stretch of period, but then it was shortened to 6 weeks. Like, hey, we need to do this for other reasons, and so that was a big project. But it sounds like at scale, if it wasn't a huge scale
Right.
like that, this large rail facility, you're doing the same thing. You essentially did that and made that connection, sorted that out, worked those UDTs, and then almost, I wouldn't say instantly, but typically with that, you can start structuring data and you set them up for the future. That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Well, we were able to make those displays and have them be interactive in the way
Right.
that they expected, but also just, in Ignition, they were able to get functional super fast.
Yes.
And we kind of did it iteratively. That's a hard thing to say if you haven't had enough coffee. So iteratively as well, because, we would push things to the existing operator screens in Ignition.
Right.
I know, pretty much almost real time. It's like, hey, do you like this? You do? Okay, cool. Do you want it live? Yes. Okay, there you
Yes.
go. And then they'd, live with it for a few days. I'm like, hey, can you move this over here a little bit? And I'm a real stickler for alignment. So, I'm always like, okay, I love that little align button, left, top, or bottom.
Yes.
That you have up there on the top of the Ignition designer.
Yes.
I use the heck out of that thing. It's like, wait, is this one pixel off? I can't, no, select all these.
So
and
when
then
you're
align on the
building and
left.
containerizing, you like to use that, you leverage it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Adrian, tell me a little bit about, some of the, in your challenges, maybe it doesn't have to be there,
Okay.
but what is the most common thing you're seeing in the beginning of a project? Where do you see success? And I want you to kind of lay out some steps. When you first get that project in your mind with Ignition, an example is, so right now you just talked about, hey, Mike, one of the first things we had to do was even identify and map this out.
Right.
Are you a fan of kind of working backwards from the problem? It sounds like you are. And in your experience, how have you done that in the past? And, and how do you carry that over to the folks that you work with?
So, a lot of times at Corso, we worked with very small teams. So often it would be just one engineer and myself. Usually they were a senior and was a regular,
Right.
but, fully capable systems engineer. But we would kind of like, okay, let's work backwards from this. It's like, if here's the desired result, and start working, breaking up the task. All right, well, we need this first, and then just kind of build that up together in Ignition. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Right.
We're starting to veer into project
No.
management, which
No.
is
Not at all.
good.
I think I'm more interested in your take on some of the challenges you've handled, right? Because that was one step, right? Just in doing that, but you've had some experience. I mean, hey, Mike, what makes this successful is integrating Ignition, and then I tackle some of the, obviously you in rapid fire, it sounds like in rapid fire, you help the customer identify in iteration, hey, this looks good. And you're able to turn something around pretty quick.
For sure. And, they had a lot of existing stuff as examples. So there was one site of theirs that they're like, hey, this is our ideal site. We would like everything to look like this and for the operator function the same.
Right.
So, even though the process might be different, if I have a newly trained operator, the site, their role is not going to, be appreciably different, other than, the words might be, different if they're using a bio-reactor versus a water process or something.
Right.
But, they all know, all these things need to be happy and pointing in the middle. Okay, cool. I'm not searching around on pages looking for something that's wildly different.
Yeah.
So,
I got you.
yeah.
And, in terms of, let's keep going with the challenge here, because man, it sounds like you spring back pretty quick on, Mike, I don't like to see things in the negative. I like to see the challenge and solve them.
Right.
And give me your take on, where you think that if you could have a wand and say, Mike, these 3 things have to happen at every project when you're using Ignition. What are in your mind? What are because you always had this top of mind thing you want to do. In your mind, Adrian, what do you think are the top 3 things that you look out for when you're involved like that with Ignition and wanting to demonstrate some flexibility?
Well, you know what? Even before we get to Ignition, I think, we go on site. I like to make sure we all know, what we mean. Because every single site that you go to, there's going to be a local language.
Right.
There's going to be terms that you've heard other places that they're using. They might be using them in a different way. So first off, I like to make sure we all understand each other, and also understanding the expectations. And sometimes the challenge with ignition is that, people, oh, what can you do with ignition?
Right.
The answer is everything.
Yeah.
And I like
love
to
that.
say, right, but here's the problem. If they don't know and they really want to know, well, what they're really asking is, what can ignition do for me? And you say anything, that what they've heard you say is, I don't know, or nothing. You may have well said nothing, because they're like, well, shoot, you've got to tailor it to their situation.
Yeah.
In this context, ignition can do all of these things that are relevant to you and your process, and look at the possibilities. At that point, you've got to, because ignition is so vast.
Yes.
And yes, you can make, they have a whole arcade made of you can make an arcade game with ignition. You can make a warehouse management system with ignition.
Yes.
You can make, obviously, SCADA,
Maintenance management.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Yes.
MES, anything you want. Historian.
Yep.
And
rail car tracking.
Tracking.
Track and trace, some capability there.
Right.
Making
cookies, making candy, making pipe elbows, making, anything. So yes, it can do it all. So I think first off is really figuring out how to communicate to the person on site what ignition can do for them specifically.
Wow.
And
that's awesome.
So that's kind of where I start with it.
Yes.
And then figuring out into the context of what are their expectations? How can we exceed those expectations?
Yes. Awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
Adrienne, I'd love to keep you, but I want to ask you one last question, because then we got to go. But man, otherwise I'd keep you here. What is your take right now, and where are you seeing some value in terms of maybe ignition, and your take on this is a big hype thing, and I want to see your take on it. Is AI, machine learning, and MCP, or model context protocol, and you can pick any one of those.
I am so excited about MCP.
Yeah.
So I've been involved with working with both ML and LLMs for a couple years now.
Awesome.
I even went to the first ever OpenAI DevDay back in 2023. There were 900 of us. I was standing in line next to the head of software at Boston Dynamics, and I'm like, oh, wow, little old me got in here.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. A lot of those tools are great as tools. You guys are also leveraging AI enabled tools to create this podcast. And I was just thrilled to hear some familiar tools before our podcast recording began. But yeah, I'm super thrilled about MCP, and actually that will shorten the timeline on some of my personal pet projects that I was looking for. So that inventory system, here's a specific example using MCP. What I would like to do is create within that system a prompt that, here's a project I want to make. Here is the BOM for that, bill of materials.
Right.
I need you to collect all those items and their quantities, and I need you to run that against my inventory management system to see what I have here in stock and what I need to buy, and also give me a list of where I should purchase those.
Or scrape the web and find pricing and look at it for the BOM. We're thinking the same thing. I see lots of great MCP projects with regard to even on the energy side for alarm management, which I think is going to be a big one.
Yeah.
Adrienne, we're going to have you back on the show.
Excellent.
Honestly, I think it would be great to talk to you a little bit more, but we got to go. I want to keep you, but I can't.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure meeting you and your team. You're doing such a cool job.
Adrian Harvey right here at ICC 2025 in the heart of Sacramento. Like and subscribe to the Energy Tech Podcast, and we love it. Thank you, Adrienne, for being here. I am your co-host, Mike Flotis, with the Energy Tech Podcast.